Hi guys, I hope you have a great day and so on. If all goes well, a wonderful vacation that we all need. It was not easy to return to face, but here we are trying to pass the semester. Obviously, obviously, if my English teacher does not follow me for my bad pronunciation, sorry, it's so bad. So I pray every day to my personal God, and but we are not here from to tell my sorrows. We have an activity which is very interesting. Like today, I will try to explain what was the Chinese Revolution, a process that emanates directly from the Cold War. You understand Cold War? United States, Soviet Union, Cold War, classic. Well, let's start with the expectation and the video that this time it will be quite long. I hope you don't get bored, because if you get bored, I get funked. And if you funk me, well, then I get funked. Sorry. I beg you to pay attention, because at the end of here will come out an exam. Calm. I'm joking. I like to joke with the people. It's a way in which we will pass the time. At the same time, in the explanation, we will put a series of interesting videos which will help us to enter in context. As I remember, I did not tell my name. What matters mine? My name is Emiliano Chavez, and I am a student of history. Upon it might seem strange, we also study a lot. Too much. The truth is I don't know. I don't know what I got to enter when I entered the degree. But it was already a lot of suffering. Sorry, we have to find the 15 minutes of duration, and then we go to the camera to better. Sorry. Although the camera is not beneficial to us. Sorry. Without further ado, I hope you enjoyed the video, and from here on you will only hear my voice. But what a great consolation prize. Sorry. Without further ado, this is the Chinese Revolution of Mao Zedong.
Introduction. In the following short essay, we will analyze one of the processes of the 20th century, the Chinese Revolution, one of the many remnants of the so-called Cold War. China was in serious trouble because for years it was under the domination of the European colonial powers. Fortunately, one of the many protests would bear fruit by preventing two powers from dividing their territory. So after the fall of the famous dynasty, a process of civil war would begin between communist and capitalist forces. Some supposed by the Soviet Union and the others by the United States. After years of confrontation and place theaters, Mao Zedong's force magnet to take power over the entire territory, putting an end to the civil war and thus laying the foundation of the so-called People's Republic of China, to begin a new cultural revolution undertaken by Mao Zedong himself.
Background. We are in the 18th and 20th century. The expansion of European colonialism is its most important point. China was immersed in stagnation. During their years, would suffered a brutal and repressive invasion. The nation causing it would be England. This action would detonate in the so-called Opium War. This would bring to China a whole century of humiliation. The most notorious consequence of this humiliation will be when the decadent rules of the Qing dynasty reorganized the rights of the British colonialists, thus making clear their dominate. Their facts will trigger the feeling of China's powers, a feeling that would engrave the Taiping Rebellion between. This rebellion would last only a few years, being controlled sometime later. With the passing of the years will arise another important movement in the boxes, which will take a place between. Movement engendered among the Chinese peasants and bureaucrats. This would be characterized by xenophobia towards the powers of the time, such as England, Germany, Italy, France, Russia, and Japan. This would unfortunately fail thanks to the constant intervention and actions of the colonialist powers. After this rebellion would come a series of discoveries which would always end up fraudulent. We must remember that this would serve to prevent China from being divided between two colonialist powers. To speak of revolution, we must first mention the origins of it, so it is important to address the Chinese cause. For the early 20th century of the Chinese nation experiences a series of changes to the unfortunate European influence. In traditional China, we introduced a number of contemporary institutions, such as fabricas, banks, machines. Similarly, were translated a number of considerations economics, politicas, scientific Chinese language itself. There's somehow we opposed to the institution, customs, and habits of ancient China. In the feeling of intellectuals had changed significantly, who wished for the nation a having based on transformation, all according to the development of the contemporary world. Sun Yat-sen, a prominent politician, founded a democratic party, the so-called Kuomintang, with a series of republican characteristics, which would begin to act formally at the beginning of the following year. The elevation of provisional constitution would be achieved, and therefore the proclamation of a republic. The emperor of the decadent Qing dynasty, which had already lost power and control of the people, would abdicate in favor of the new republic. Unfortunately, the ambition of the military chiefs and warlords would unleash a series of confrontation in the premature China nation. After this World War, the Venice Conference would grant Japan the former Germany rights over the Shandong Peninsula. This would unleash again a series of protests against the the penetration of Japanese colonialism. Consequently, the Chinese Republic will emerge in the midst of a crisis. Cause of the Chinese Cultural Revolution. The cause, as we have already seen, must be seen in the complex web of relations after the fall of the Qing dynasty at the beginning of the 20th century. We find a country derived between the Republic parties of a China defined as democratic and capitalist. This one full of strong European influence which degraded along the colonialist relation that China had lived for centuries. We have the followers of Mao Zedong, Soviet communism with a spirit to vindicate the Chinese peasantry and abolish the existing class society. Seen in this way, the Chinese Civil War would lead to the Communist Revolution, especially when the world powers of the 20th century began to interfere with the sole invasion of wartime China. An important ally, the most interested powers were the Soviet Union and United States, which open or secret favored a series of diplomatic, economic, and military support, absolutely each and favoring their respective sides. That is why the word saying of relations between the Republic of China and the United States will be a significant factor in tipping the balance in favor of the communist militaries. In addition to the Soviet support and the delivery by the communists of the weapons that will be seized in Manchuria by the Japanese army itself during the Second World War, which is why we must understand that there was a great international possibility in the communist victory at Lux. By of origin, we can mention of death of the Dr. Sujat-Sen. 2 years later, General Chiang Kai-shek would execute a coup death. We would begin to attack and persecute the Chinese communists, which would cause them to organize and answer with their own uprising. They would form their own army. This is when the Civil War would begin. Meanwhile, the Japanese invasion would begin to take shape. After the Second World War, Mao Zedong troops would control almost all the continent territory. In this way, the nationalist troops of Chiang Kai-shek would be expelled to the island of Taiwan. They would be protected by an American fleet troop. Their nationalist China will be funded when a respective industry will be developed with an investment of American capitalists. Motivations of the revolution. Before mentioning the cause, we must make clear what the Chinese Cultural Revolution sought to achieve. It sought to put a resounding end to the era of for all ones. The customs, mentality, culture, and habits of time of the dynasties, which had to overcome in order to lead society to a better era. We must add the elimination of the capitalism influence and bourgeois deus itself. The Communist Party will seek the creation of an emotional and moral bond. This should be born from the population and should be oriented toward the artistic artistic representation of communist China. It would take into account the culture itself, which would help the constitution of identity with the formation of a sense of belonging. Mao Zedong will be placed as a cult figure thanks to his ideological postures. This acted as a light that should illuminate the path of re-education. In this way, the so-called Red Book, along with other works which expressed the character of communism, will be placed as compulsory reading in the branch of education. Phase of the revolution. After analyzing the motivation of the Chinese Revolution, we must maintain the different phases of the war, which can be organized chronologically. The end of the peace negotiation. At this stage, there was a resumption of the Chinese Civil War, despite of efforts of the United States and the Soviet Union to mediate both sides and Dutch archives a mixed government which should prevent them from confronting each other. Since the Soviets had openly supported the Chinese Revolution, translated the wind to bipolarity would call the reactor in the region of the USA and the Soviet Union. We able to establish a new government and the view for control of the area and thus influence in China. The nationalist offensive. One of the first movements after the breakdown of the place and the force of the negotiation was the nationalists who invaded Manchuria and northern China, seizing cities against the support of the Americans, who even supported the selling of arms to the Chinese government for 10 months. By the end of the same year, the so-called Chinese National Assembly will proclaim a democratic constitution. In this promulgation, the participation of the communist faction will be left out. The military supremacy of the so-called nationalists will last until April, when the attempts to delete the adversary will fail and their offensive was finally supported. The communist counterattack. By the middle of the long-awaited during the destiny of the war took place. Since by this time, the first offensive counterattacks of the Red Army led by Mao Zedong took place, which would reconquer cities and sink the morals of their enemy, unlasting a series of desertion and massive defection. The decisive communist victories. The strategies of the communist army will prevent the cause of the war and recover Manchuria. This will cause their adversary almost 500,000 casualties in military matters. In this way, of the end of the communists already had the control of the northeast of the country, with the weakening of their capacity to defend their position and with their morale destroyed, the nationalists would suffer a series of significant defeats. In the end, the situation fully favored the communists, and the nationalist General Chiang Kai-shek would request the resumption of negotiation. We would ask of the support of the great European powers. The Soviet Union and USA, but unfortunately all of them would be not be able to resume negotiation. The final offensive, after taking Peking, the capital of the old China Empire, the communists would have their reign completely free. After a short and unsuccessful period of negotiation, the nationalists would enter in April to Nanjing, which would be the old capital of the Chinese Republic, and they took full control of the country. On October 5, the new Communist Republic would be proclaimed and their enemies would take refuge in the island of Taiwan, when they would wait for years for a communist attack. Founding of the People's Republic of China. On October, the communist leader Mao Zedong declared the founding of the Republic of China. A series of structural reforms in the different fields of human endeavor began, and in a short time a series of enormous results would be obtained based on its own researches and favours especially the establishment of the so-called system of people's communes. Through the systematic organization of collective life, it would come to occupy an important place in the international context. Zedong would be undisputed leader of the march of the new China. It would promote the development of a transcendental movement in the Chinese with that of the Red Wars, which would bear the name of Cultural Republic. One of the consequences that we could mention will be eradication of the existing republic and force the leaders of this to exile. Mao took political power and announced the creation of the so-called People's Republic of China. This new state would be communist and authoritarian affiliation when Mao was the political and spiritual leader. In addition to ending the China Civil War, would lay the groundwork of the arrival of the Chinese cultural renovation that Mao Zedong himself would lead. Conclusion. It is clear that during the 20th century we found an address number of wars and independence processes. Such is the case of China's Revolution, one of the many processes resurging from the Cold War between the Soviet Union and United States. We could realize that it was undoubtedly a complex process, but somehow easy to understand, since both communist and constitutionalist forces faced the other for the control of the territory and impulsion of each of them ideologies. In a fascinating way, it will be Zedong who will take power, filling the latter to exile in Taiwan. Zedong in turn will undertake a process that will be called Cultural Revolution, a more complex project that could easily be understood individuality.